Podcast.
Welcome to the Unrest Podcast. I'm Madeline Green.
And I'm Caitlin Stansel. Thank you so much for joining us back here on the Unrest Podcast. If you have not yet, please subscribe and you can catch all of our real life haunts as we post them.
So today's real life haunt is Kat, and she has a pretty cool experience that not only she experienced, but also her young daughter. So take a listen.
Ever since I was little, I've been able to see and talk to spirits. Most of the time they've been good. Other times they have been bad. But I've been able to help both sides. Once I started to realize what I could do, I could go into trances and go through it like that. I was able to do it more after I learned how to do it, and I taught myself. Because nobody else in my family that we know of can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I taught myself how to, control it. And if I don't want to see the bad, I can just, turn it off like a switch. And most of the time, it's mostly good because I've been able to see my family that passed away. When I was 13, my grandma passed away. And I kind of had a vision when I was in the hospital with her, and I was sleeping, and I didn't know anything about it, never seen anybody pass away before, and I had a vision in my dream that somebody in the hospital, I didn't know who, because it was like a blur at the time, and somebody in the hospital passed away, and family members came in and started crying, and I woke up, and the nurses escorted me out and told me that something happened. So I really didn't think much of it because everything happens in a hospital. So I really didn't think any much of it until the doctor came in and said, well, I'm sorry for your loss, but she died. And after that, I could see her and I could talk to her. And then 3 months later, my aunt passed away. They were on the way from California to here in Oklahoma to see me and my family. I didn't know where they were. I didn't know that they were stopped at a gas station. Fell asleep that night. Had a dream that somebody at a gas station passed away and somebody was doing CPR on them. That next morning, my uncle called me and said, your aunt passed away at the gas station.
Have you had any other instances like that?
My grandpa is still alive, but I've been having this reoccurring dream that he was in the hospital and his heart stopped, and he's had a triple bypass right now. He's down to where only one of the main pumps to the heart is working. So I've been having that dream reoccur, so I don't know when, but I know it's going to happen. My oldest, who is going to be 3, can now see and talk just like I did when I was little. A little girl spirit that I used to play with all the time when I was a young child. Her name was Lily, and she was 9 years old. Grew up, didn't see her anymore because she was a child. My daughter came in one day and said, ghost. Never seen a horror movie in her life. Never knew what a ghost was. Randomly came into the living room one day and, Mommy, ghost. Where's the ghost? She pointed to the hallway and she said, right there. And I was like, well, what is her name? Lily. I was like, and how old is Lily? I've never told her about Lily. I've never told her her age. And she goes, 9. So after that, I was just like, oh, well, is she friendly? Yeah, she's friendly. Well, that's good. And so she's been playing with her. And then one night, she came over to the bed and looked at me and she's like, Mommy, scary man. I asked her, I was like, what's scary man? And she's like, and she pointed to the corner of the room behind my bedroom door, and she said, right there, scary man. I was like, well, what's the scary man doing? Staring at me?
Do you guys live in like an older house or anything like that?
No, it was just built.
It wasn't obviously the house where you played with Lily as a kid.
No, it's a different house.
Wow, so it's almost like she followed you.
Yeah.
Does she play with her a lot, or is that kind of the only time you hear about her?
Oh no, she plays with her all the time. She'll roll a ball down the hallway and the ball will roll back to her.
What advice would you give someone who's just, experiencing this stuff that you have for the first time and might be, a little confused or scared? I know you said you're able to kind of turn off when you want to see things and not, especially the bad stuff. What advice kind of would you give someone?
Don't show the bad fear. That is what they go for.
Mm-hmm.
They feed off of your fear. Don't give in to them. And if you can help and know what the good wants, try to help them as much as you can, but understand that it does take a toll on your body. It will give you headaches. If you feel like you cannot handle it, just tell them that have to have somebody else help them because you are not ready.
Headaches, that's interesting. We talk a lot about sort of this negative energy that people feel, and I do wonder sometimes, like, does that have a physical effect as well?
I've actually heard that headaches are kind of a common thing, which is not good because I get headaches a lot.
Same here. I wonder if maybe I'm just experiencing negative energy.
But I really enjoyed her stories, the little girl that she used to play with as a kid, and now her daughter is playing with that same girl named Lily. It's really interesting to think about it. It's obvious that this little girl has followed them because it's a completely different house.
And like she said, like there was really no other way that her daughter would have known those details.
Exactly.
And I just think that's fascinating. Plus, you always hear about children just being a lot more open to that sort of stuff. And I love when you hear things about kids that, maybe see or experience spirits, because a lot of times it seems like it's maybe not, something bad, like it's
Right.
a imaginary friend.
Right. And you have a story that someone wrote into us that you're going to share.
Yes, since our story from Kat was a little short, we have one that was written into us by Linda, and this is what she has to say. She says, I was working a night shift on a children's ward. It was a quiet night, and all the kids were stable and sleeping. My colleague and I made our way around the ward, checking patients, and performed our routine observations. We then stocked up the treatment room. We just could not believe our luck. Everyone was so settled. And it was very rare to be able to sort of relax on a night shift. So we decided to sit down, have a chat, make ourselves a coffee, and then write our final reports. Suddenly, though, the office phone rang out. My colleague answered and quickly handed the phone over to me. It was a switchboard. The operator told me that a child had called from our treatment room and said there was a crash happening. And she says by crash, they meant a resuscitation or a cardiac arrest, and that it was happening in our treatment room. I gasped and told her everything was quiet and that everyone was sleeping. And then we both rushed into the room and found the phone hanging off the hook and the room completely ransacked. It looked as if there was actually a resuscitation taking place. There were tubes on the bed, oxygen masks, and syringes on the floor. Drawers and cupboard doors were open, and the entire contents of that crash trolley pulled out of its place. I rushed back to the phone, told the lady on the switch what I had found, and she was speechless. We had both stocked up and cleaned the room earlier in the evening, and we stood there just looking at each other. We quickly rushed to check the main entrance to the ward and checked on our patients, and everything was in order. So we both kind of just sat there in disbelief for a moment. And at that same time, a parent came to the door and asked for some milk for her baby. This mom was a resident in the mother's baby unit that was further along the corridor. And I asked her if she and her baby had slept well. And she replied, yes, until the sound of people running and the sound of loud voices had disturbed them. She said she had wanted some milk for her baby, but decided to wait. And she then pointed to the treatment room and stated that she could hear that we were both busy with a sick patient. We both looked at each other at this point. On my way out, I stopped by the switchboard and asked about the call to the ward. I asked, why would a child make an emergency crash call? This was a call only made by doctors, nurses, and other health professionals. There were just no words or explanations. Wow.
That's a really cool story.
Yes. And not just that this happened to them, but then this mother who was in another room down the corridor, like almost validated it all as well. I mean, that's wild.
It almost makes you want to like look into, past incidences where they did have this, type of cardiac arrest or something like that going on, because obviously it has to be something connected to something.
Yeah, some sort of experience that happened there. But like, I wonder why these two nurses, they didn't hear anything,
Yeah, that's
crazy.
That's really interesting.
Oh my gosh, I love how she told this story too. Like it had all the suspense.
Right. I didn't read it, so that's the first time I've actually heard the whole story. So it was definitely a treat.
Thank you so much for sending this in, Linda. We loved sharing your story.
And we want to hear from you guys. If you guys have a story, you can do like Linda did and write it into us. We can do an interview. We'll take it however you want to give it.
Yep, that's true.
Sounds kind of dirty.
We just want your stories. We don't care how you give them to us. But you can send those to us by email at theunrestpodcast@gmail.com
or you can definitely check us out on Facebook and send your stories through there. We also have a TikTok. Go check that out. And until next time,
Unrest in peace.